And let's be truthful. If the bishop had not gone with Professor Kari, this is counterfactual. It is doubtful whether he would have got this reception. But as you know, it's amazing. Professor Kari's daughter Dora was already working in State House. So think about the president. You have been with the daughter of this man, and this man comes to you asking for, how can you refuse? My goodness, this is fantastic. This is great. So indeed, friends, government granted the university all the infrastructure requirements which were at National Teachers College, Kakova, which was a government institution training diploma for teachers in primary and secondary education. Just think, the requirements that you would need for interim authority, which required infrastructural requirements. With Professor Kari's initiative to be a vice chancellor and consequently going with the chancellor to the president, the granting of infrastructure facilities at this campus boosted the efforts of fulfilling the requirements from the National Council for Higher Education. No question about it. And we thank the president for this support, and we thank the president for the friendship he had with Professor Kari. Professor Kari was very endowed indeed, as you can see. You don't get 50 million from nobody. Professor Kari was endowed. Professor Kari had worked. Professor Kari had earned. Professor Kari had retired to enjoy the benefit of his retirement. But he left that comfort zone of his retirement and came what the Bishop Chamgambi called Mtara, or a desert, starting from crash. Just imagine you are in retirement and you have all the things you have earned in your life to enjoy in your retirement. You now leave all that. I want you to see why we call him servant. You leave all that to come and subject yourself to the hard desk when you are describing, to the hard desk in order, we were with him. The thought of failing, he couldn't conceive, he couldn't imagine it. How can you start and fail? He would go to any length to ensure this university starts. That's Professor Kari. The church, and indeed this university, I must commend you for recognizing Professor Kari's contribution and holding him in high respect. He was such a humble professor who could listen. And the university needs to acknowledge people like him who give their time and money and to make this university what it is today. Now, Professor Eli, I had talked with you in preparing this memorial lecture. I'm so pleased you are a discussant. But all the same, I can share with you what Professor Eli, as the first, because these two people were pillars. You had Professor Kari as the Vice Chancellor, then you had Eli Sabiti as the Chairman of Governing Council. For those who know the governance of universities, you have the Board of Trustees, those are founders. But you have the Governing Council, which by law is the supreme organ of the university in policy making. And consequently, the role of these two people, the Vice Chancellor and the Chairman of the Governing Council, they make or break the institution. So Professor Sabiti, who was the chairman of Professor Kari as the Vice Chancellor, and worked with him, he made observation, and you can add But what I had obtained, and of course I was there because I'm also a founding member of governing council of this university. So what I'm saying is I witnessed it. According to Saviti, Professor Rukare was one who convinced me to sign the appointment letter from Bishop Chamgambi to be chairman of the governing council of the proposed university. I want you to see. Those who know Eri Saviti, I'm so sorry I can say this now that I have been. Professor Saviti is a man of high standard and is very cautious indeed. He doesn't rush. And to accept taking responsibility, I know once he does, that's it. But it is very hard to get him to accept. So we credit Professor Rukare for convincing Professor Eri to become chairman of governing council. According to you, Professor Rukare was humble but very wise and very intelligent. He had special respect for every member of council. He was highly qualified. He was very credible, dependable, and reliable. And he was a good administrator. He respected the council members and its resolution. And as council, we never had any conflict with him. We freely worked with him when he had no money. He was very good at implementing decisions of council. He was always available, ready, and consult. He accommodated and handled staff issues effectively. He had unquestionable Christian values. And in conclusion, according to Sabiti, the university ran smoothly, peacefully, and in an orderly manner during Professor Rukare's leadership as the Vice Chancellor. That's Professor Rukare. You know, university people, conflict resolution in a university is a science and art. And there are very few people who have that capacity. The university, you know, in the university, you have this, a university is different from a high school, largely because at the university, you are expected to be mature. You are expected to have developed your capacity to think and think rationally and objectively and make decisions that solve problems. But you are also granted academic freedom to do so. And ideas are always conflicting. A vice chancellor who can manage that situation of conflicting ideas, which is necessary, and yet move smoothly, particularly at the formation of the university, we shall forever be grateful to Professor Rukare. He was great. Now, Professor Sabiti recommends for those who want to be like Professor Rukare, you need the following. I'm literally quoting Professor Sabiti. You must be a listening leader. You must respect staff because you are here for each one, for each other. You must be dedicated to your work. Make positive contribution for the good of the university. Work beyond time. Listen to issues of your staff. And people who don't listen don't do well in any institution. Be a mentor to those working below you. Share ideas and practice self-sacrifice. And this is exactly what Professor Sabiti learned from Enoch Rukare. Virtues any vice chancellor should emulate. Friends, this university is a church-founded university. And before it was done, there are those who worked for them. And one of them is Canon Philemon Tinker, who at the time was a diocesan education secretary And he made testimonies about Professor Kare, whom he worked with during the formation process of the university. And he comments, Professor Kare was a renowned personality, both nationally and internationally, and this was an advantage the Bishop University in its infancy. He was very instrumental in guiding the Diocesan Council and Board of Education as we planned for Bishop Stuart University formation. Professor Noel, who was the Vice Chancellor of Uganda Christian University at the time, had special reference for Professor Kare. He admired his zeal and determination, and that is why when Bishop Stuart University applied to affiliate with Uganda Christian University, it was easily done because of Professor Kare's relationship with Professor Noel. In fact, Professor Noel did that without even consulting the University Council, because he knew the Council would respect Professor Kare's reputation and integrity. And indeed, Uganda Christian University made a memorandum of understanding with Bishop Stuart University, and the university was able to grant degrees of Uganda Christian University from this campus. No, you should really see the university here. It would have been difficult to grant university, and by granting degrees of Uganda Christian University from here, largely because of Professor Kare's reputation and relation with Professor Noel, this university is achieving this progress that you are seeing today. Professor Kare introduced a bursary fund to support children of pastors, and the beneficiaries of this fund, they include Dennis Kakuva. I'm sure Kakuva is a lecturer here. Yeah, there's a product of that fund which he set. And there is also Mr. Caleb Singwire, who is the son of Reverend Mpairwe. This Caleb now is a headmaster at Nyakatura Memorial Senior Secondary School. This is Professor Kare. He supported the idea of making Diocesan Education Secretary to be an ex-official member of the University Council. He also raised the rank of University Chaplain to be the third in hierarchy, and his aim was to ensure that Christian values in the university are protected and promoted in its governance. This is Professor Kare. The last group is the staff who worked with him. You need to know their reaction team. You know, pioneering work, for those who have been pioneering, is very hard. Very, very hard. You are starting from scratch. Look at the comfort we have. But that started. You are an egg. With the university, the staff had very special reverence for Professor Kare and gave him testimony, and I just single out a few. According to the staff, Professor Kare was always available in office to guide, direct, and give counsel. He had a strong touch for both staff and students. He was very thrift and sensitive to spending. He was very sensitive at spending funds. This is very important. You simply don't know how. I think Professor Bangamba is here. Bangamba is here. Yeah, why I'm singling him out? We were constructing structures here, and some workers stole cement. The man almost he became clerk of works because he didn't want to see people stealing. Starting things is not easy. And Professor Kare was sensitive at spending university funds. He would always take priorities very seriously. He was very sensitive to environmental issues. He demolished all the unnecessary structures on this hill, especially pit latrines. You must have flushing toilets, pit latrines. The staff knew him as a pious and committed, peaceful man. He would say sorry to any person whom he felt has offended, regardless of his status. He would carefully choose and use words as he talked and addressed any audience without offending anybody. He was good in public relations. He was always available and on time, at the station for any consultation. To take any serious decision, he would first consult the staff members. Yeah, consultation, he would consult. Not because he didn't know, he knew. But university is governed differently. You need a consensus. And he did. He believed in meetings, and he would have meetings regularly of staff and management. And he always challenged the staff to belong. He challenged the staff to belong, and he believed in corporate governance and ownership. And he would say, Bishop Stuart University is our university. There are people, yeah, don't worry about the umbrella, I can stand. I don't know, you need to understand this. There are people who come to this university as if it belonged somewhere. This university is your university. And I appeal to the students, because the university distinction is, if you cannot distinguish between wrong and right as a university student, if you cannot separate these two, then you are a danger to society. And that's why Professor Kare would endeavor to consult you so that you distinguish what's wrong and what's right. Why I'm saying so, friends, it is typical, common in high school, and sometimes in universities, unfortunately. You go to the dining hall and the food is not good. And you organize a strike as a student. And the strike goes to the laboratory, goes to the library, you break windows, and you begin to think, if you're a university student, how could the library have been involved in your conflict? Surely you have failed to separate. If the food is bad, first the guy who has cooked it that way. But to break a window, to break a laboratory, to burn books, that's not university. And that's why Professor Kare is special. He knew what's wrong and what's right, but he would still consult you to see whether you measure. What a man. He challenged the university to belong. This university is our university. If it is your university, you don't. Fantastic. He was a good manager, and he tried to know his staff and students by name. This is hard these days with population in classes, to know the names of the students. You know, people to know names of their students is a mark real of effort. And this is Professor Kare. He would know you by name. He was always free and ready to interact with students. Professor Kare was God-loving personality who had good pioneering spirit, which gave the staff a wonderful image of university that had good Christian core values that all members felt were being cherished and appreciated. This is why, this is the staff now we are giving testimony. This is why the staff were ever willing and available to work, even when they were paid less and sometimes late. They were willing to do so for the respect they gave Professor Enoch Rukare. Indeed, Bishop Stuart University is what it is because of Professor Rukare's zeal, commitment and contribution, and the firm foundation he laid for this institution. According to staff, whoever wants to take any pride of this university should not forget the people who saw the vision, shared the vision, and implemented the vision. I want to conclude, friends. My Lord Bishop, friends of the university, and Professor Rukare's family. You know, leaders have existed throughout history of mankind. All societies have, and will continue to have leaders. Some good leaders, some not so good, but you will have leaders all the same. And some leaders become leaders as a result of heredity. You inherit it if you are a king. Professor Rukare didn't inherit this position. He earned it. Others become leaders as a result of force through acts of war. Professor Rukare didn't do this. In modern times, and I can give my own personal testimony, we have leaders through political process. And the question, as we conclude this lecture, you want to ask, what is it that distinguished Enoch Rukare as an effective vice-chancellor, as an effective leader, that we should be remembering today and we should emulate? If you ask that question, what is it? That's the conclusion I want to submit to you. What, in my own judgment, distinguished Professor Rukare is what I call servant leadership traits. Have servant leadership traits. Servant leaders are those who lead because they genuinely want to serve others. It is very rare, but they are people who will go to any length in their desire to serve others. The essence of this leadership is described in the Bible. If you look at Matthew chapter 20, verse 25, it is written, and I'm paraphrasing, it is written that Jesus called his disciples and said, whoever wants to become great among you, you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you, he must be your slave. I'm paraphrasing, but you can check it. Matthew chapter 20, verse 25. Servant leadership, that's what I am. Just as the Son of Man did not come to serve, but to be served. No. Just as Son of Man did not come to serve, to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom for many. The essence of servant leadership, the traits that Professor Enoch Rukare had and distinguished him, is precisely this. And there is a consensus. As I was preparing this memorial lecture, I consulted. There is a consensus among all his friends and the testimonies that I have given in this lecture of those who worked with him. Professor Rukare placed the needs of this university way ahead of his own university, of his own needs. When his testimony is class, this is a man retired sitting on a hard desk. Why? Because the needs of university stood, he took the needs of university above his own. That is what we call servant leadership. Servant. To desire to serve others instead of yourself. Listen, even when he had retired and was advanced in age, this is true. Even when he had retired and was advanced in age, he agreed to do a thankless and pioneering work in establishing Bishop Stuart University, of which we are all very proud today. Servant leadership traits. But not only that, for some of us who worked with him, he had what is now known as transformational leadership. Transformational leadership is characterized by the desire to change the status quo, focusing on higher purpose of creating change for a better future with the transforming effect. No, friends, transformation. For some of us who came here when this place was starting, and you see it today, can only be done by leadership that has that transforming. You want to change the status quo, you focus on a higher purpose of establishing a better future with a transforming effect. That's Professor Kari. If you want to contrast it, there is a contrast. The contrast is transactional leadership. Transactional leadership. And I can say this because I have seen it at a very close range. Transactional leadership is characterized by exchange relationship, mpankwe, with no enduring purpose binding the leader and the follower. We have seen it in the electoral process. Yeah? You give money, they give you votes. Finish. That is transactional. No, not Professor Kari. His is transformational. Professor Kari shared the vision of establishing university for generating knowledge. He did. Professor Kari loved education. You better believe it. That's why, regardless of his retirement and advanced age, when it came to education, establishing a university, when it came to generating knowledge, when it came to building servanthood character relevant to social, political, and economic transformation, the philosophy of this university, Professor Kari stood up to be counted. Professor Kari is with his creator now, but his ideas and legacy will live forever, touching and transforming the lives of so many. He was indeed a true servant and transformational leader of all time. I thank you for listening to me. God reigns. Thank you.
That was a great, great speech. An extra hand clap. That was very great, very nice. Huh? Now, allow me to invite Professor Sabiti. Professor Sabiti has already been mentioned in the speech that has passed, but Sabiti starts back with me. His CV starts at Ontario School with me for 6 years. Even Professor Kamuntu Ontario School, he was my house captain. So, but Professor Sabiti went to Makerere and distinguished himself as a scholar, doctorate in agriculture, became a dean of the faculty, worked on several committees and the Senate of the university, worked to honorable retirement, but he's not tired. In the footsteps of Professor Ukari, is yet serving more universities. Professor Sabiti, you can give your comment, your relationship with this great hero. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, the chairman. Our chief guest, because of time, allow me to say all protocols observed. I know we have sat for quite a long time listening to a great speaker who has given us everything we wanted to hear. And under normal circumstances, a paper like this, when you are honoring a great leader, you don't discuss it. Because you will contradict yourself and you don't allow any questions. Because we are honoring a great leader. And this is what we would call a citation. Because he's being honored. Professor Okare is being honored for what he did when he was still alive as the pioneering vice chancellor of this great university. So, what I can only do is to add a little that Professor Kamuntu, who was also here, who started from scratch with us, other than that, what I stand here as a witness of the speaker, of the keynote speaker, because I was here, and I'm still here, by the way. Yeah, I'm still here serving on the council, but not a chairperson. What I found special in late Professor Okare was his humility. In 2003, I had finished being dean for 10 years at Makerere University, dean of faculty of agriculture and forestry. And it was a very, very stressful job. So I wanted to retire and return to research and supervising students. So when I was in my office, I heard footsteps, slow footsteps, which were unique because they were different from the footsteps of my students. I said, this cannot be from my students. So when he knocked, I don't think he didn't knock because I don't close my doors. He entered with a book, greeted me, and opened the book where all members of the University Council had signed except me. And I was number one. Not only a member, but being a chairperson. So he said, your father, the bishop, has asked me to bring this book to you to sign